So since I've been away, I've read quite a few books that I want to talk to you about. But we are just going to mention the standout books that I've read in the last year or so, or would be here all day. So let's get straight into it. So we're going to start off strong with an author that I've really enjoyed in the past. And these are her two latest releases that I'm going to be talking about. And that is Mad Honey and By Any Other Name by Jodi Picoult. So we're going to start with Mad Honey, as this is the one that I read first. Mad Honey has two POVs throughout the book, and that is Olivia and Lily. Olivia has just escaped her abusive marriage and she is returned back home. And in so, she has taken over the beekeeping family business. As she is here with her daughter Lily, Lily has met a boy named Asher. And Asher is this popular high school student who I think he plays ice hockey or something. He's on the ice hockey team. Then one day Olivia gets a phone call to say that Lily has been found dead and that Asher has been locked up for the murder of Lily. From there, I believe we follow two different timelines. One being Lily's timeline, which is the lead up to her death, and the other being Olivia's timeline, which is after the death of Lily. Mad Honey is actually a collaboration between Jodi Picoult and Jennifer Finney Boylan, and honestly, I was a little bit hesitant. I find that collaborations sometimes feel disjointed, and I was hesitant going into this one. Their two voices together really made this book, and it was a powerful voice, and I believe that it couldn't have been written without one or the other. Everything about it just felt right. The story flowed really well. I can't say too much into the story because it touches on murder mystery kind of thriller plot. That being said, I feel like that isn't the driving force of the story, and there's a lot of layers to unpack here, and it's just so much more than that, and it was done beautifully. It's definitely worth the read. I read it in a couple of days when I was on holiday, and I seem to have just flew through this, and I absolutely loved it. Everyone say hello to Helly, by the way. By Any Other Name is in a similar format and similar layout to Mad Honey. We have two dual POVs and two different timelines. One of them is Melina Green, who lives in modern day Manhattan, and she is trying to become a playwright. She's inspired by her ancestor story, Amelia Bassano, who we also see living through the 1500s, who also wanted to become a playwright, but in the 1500s, it was almost impossible for her to get her work released. So there, she meets a man who, by the name of William Shakespeare, publishes her plays under his name. And this is why I keep reading across all the genres, because this book has proven to me, among others, that I can like historical fiction. Historical fiction is a genre that I've always said I don't like, but I have got a few favourites in historical fiction now. So I will carry on reading from the genre. I just think I need to narrow down what it is that I do like and what I don't like in the genre. But this just proves to me why I read everything, basically. Picoult's writing is just phenomenal. I will say there was a bit of a slog in this book for about 50 to maybe 100 pages, nearing to the end. But once it took back off again, kind of as we were coming to the end, it all came together beautifully. And I was left thinking about these characters for a very long time afterwards. I'll always read from her. She always brings conversation to really important topics. And I feel like they're perfect book club reads. I think she's really important to read from, and she does a great job every time. The next book I want to mention is Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. I'm not exactly sure how to describe her writing, other than it's quiet. She's another author that touches on really important matters that make for great conversation, but her tone is completely different to anything that I've read before, from anyone I've read before. Parable of the Sower was published in the early 90s, I believe, but it's set in the current timeline. I think it starts from 2024 to 2027. And what's interesting is, I'll just read a line off the back here. It says, "America is a place of chaos where violence rules and only the rich and powerful are safe," which I think touches on a lot of what is happening currently. And because this book is set in the current day and age, but written in the 90s, I think it is an eerie read. It is quite strange, but it makes for definitely an interesting read. In this, we follow Lauren, who is basically the equivalent of a really big empath. She feels everything that everyone else feels, and she decides to journal her experiences. and everything she feels along with it. And from there, we follow her journey for a better way of living. She dreams of a better way to live. The writing is really impactful and the story is really important. I would definitely pick this up if you think you're in the right headspace for it. Obviously, it touches on a lot that feels really real right now. I believe this is part of just a duology. I know it's part of some sort of series. I think it's just a duology because I do have the second book, Parable of the Talents, and I do want to get to that. But I think someone said to me that the topics are harder in the second book. So I'm intrigued, but when the time is right, I think. I am eager to read more by her because I have enjoyed others by her as well. Kindred was the first one that I did read by her, and that was also a really good read. The next book I want to mention is Clara and the Sun by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is another that I took on holiday with me alongside Mad Honey and also ended up flying through. In this, we follow an artificial friend that's called Clara, and we see her as she belongs in this store, hoping and waiting for a family to eventually pick her and take her home to be a part of their family. This book is really interesting as the narrator is from one that I've never read from before. It's a unique take, and it's basically seeing human experiences and human life being lived through something that's not human. And as much as I enjoyed this, if I were to film this video as soon as I put this book down, I don't think this book would be getting mentioned in this video. I did have a good time with it, but I wasn't fully sold on it. That being said, since I put this book down, I have thought about it nearly every day. There's something about this author's writing that has just stuck with me, and I definitely want to read more by him. So if anyone else has read anything else by him and you would recommend something, let me know which one I should read next, because I am eager to read something else by him, because the fact that he stuck with me so long and this story has stuck with me so long, even though I wasn't massively blown out the park by it. I won't lie, it's a good book, but it was nothing that blew me away by the time I finished it, but it still stuck with me. I don't know, I just find that to be really interesting, and I would like to pick something else up by him. Next up is What You Were Looking For Is in the Library. This book was exactly what I needed when I picked this up, which I love when that happens. In this, we watch as a librarian sees visitors come in and she is there to provide the exact book that is needed for each of these visitors. This book is split up into stories, and we follow people from a mother who is having problems at work as she took maternity leave, to an elderly gentleman who retired and is now looking for a new purpose in life, to someone who has started a new job and wants to learn new skills. As I said, I read this at the perfect time. It meant everything to me at the time. I read it when I was feeling a little bit hopeless and like I didn't know what path to take or if there was a correct path for me to take. And this kind of showed me that no matter what anyone goes through, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, and people go through all different kinds of issues, and there does seem to be a solution at some point in life. And I know not everything is fixed as easily as it is in this book, but it just gave a bit of hope to that, and it is exactly what I needed at the time. It was my emotional support book, and I think it's one that I would definitely pick up again if needed. Jack Edwards actually described this as hopecore in a book, which I think is the perfect description. It does get a little bit repetitive because the premise of it throughout is always the same, but I think that kind of is also intentional and makes a lot of sense, and I really enjoyed that aspect of it. I will say there is one thing in here that is a bit of an uncomfortable read, and it's the way the librarian is described. There's an obsession with describing her as fat, and I think that is a bit of an uncomfortable read when it's so unnecessary. So just beware of that if you are wanting to read this. But other than that, this was the book that I needed at the time, and I am grateful for what it did for me. Now, I wanted to say, let's move on to some lighter reads, but they are thrillers. They can still be quite dark, and the author especially that I'm going to mention next is definitely not lighter. But I think the books that I've just mentioned are all quite reflective in the same kind of essence. This one that I'm going to mention now is Karen Slaughter, and it's her newest release, which is We're All Guilty Here. I do have 2 copies because the publisher reached out to me and offered me an ARC, which I instantly snatched up because, of course, anyone who knows me knows I love Karen Slaughter. And I got this one on publication day where there was an event held in London where I got to meet Karen Slaughter. But this is the first in a new series. It is set in a place called North Falls, which is a really small neighbourhood where everyone knows everyone. We end up following Emmy Clifton, and one day her best friend's daughter runs up to her and she seems a bit stressed and she has gone to her for help. And Emmy kind of shrugs it off, thinks it's a bit of teenage drama, and she's got other things on her mind at the time. She doesn't end up finding out what she wanted, what she needed help with. She goes on about her day. Then this girl goes missing, and Emmy, alongside the rest of the town, are on the search to find her and to find out what's happened to her. As I said, this is a lot different from her usual books, but I will still say she is a really dark author and she's quite detailed. So if you were to pick anything up by her, do check the trigger warnings if you need to. But every time she writes a very solid thriller that doesn't disappoint, and I will continue to pick her books up. The next book is Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll. This is a fiction book based on real life events, and it follows Pamela, who is sorority president. She wakes up in her sorority house to a violent scene. She sees her friends that have been murdered, and we then follow the process after that. We also follow a different timeline, which is Ruth, and I believe, I can't remember fully, so bear with me. I believe she goes missing and a friend is on the hunt to find out what happened, and she's heard about these crimes that have been happening and she believes they are connected, from what I can remember. What I do remember from this book is the way it was written. It was written so respectfully. The focus was on the victims of the crime rather than glamorizing the story of the murderer, which I think is usually what happens. The author also spoke to one of the real victims, and I think she went about everything with the greatest amount of respect. Yeah, I just love to see a change in the way that crime is dealt with, and I think this was a good way to see how that can be done. Next up is a horror book that impressed me so much that every other horror book has to live up to this standard now, and that is We Used to Live Here by Marcus Cleaver. In this, we follow Charlie and Eve, who have just bought this beautiful old home. It's in this remote neighborhood in the mountains. And one day, there's a knock at the door, and this man says, "I used to live here. Could I show my family around?" And this is where you say, "No, thank you. Have a good day." You close the door, and then there's no book. But Eve is the only one that's at home at the time, and she is a people pleaser. So, of course, she ends up letting them in. From there, shit hits the fan. The way the fear is done in this book is exactly how I wanted it done. I also listened to it through audiobook, and that definitely added to the fear. It was a great use of audio, so I would definitely recommend that if you were thinking about it. There was also a part in the book where we actually leave the scene of the house, and I usually feel that the intensity goes down when you leave the place that's given the fear, if that makes sense. So that the house felt like the scary part to me, and I felt like if we left the house, the fear would not be there as intensely. That didn't happen. We left the house. I was still on the edge of my seat. I just can't explain how much I enjoyed this and how much this was like the perfect horror book for me. I will say, when I first got this, I think it was a birthday gift off James. Instantly, all I heard was negative reviews. So I didn't read it straight away. And then all of a sudden I was in the mood for horror. So I ended up trying to give it a go, and my expectations weren't high. And this ended up being perfect. I had no reason to worry. The thing is, I now know why people don't like this book, and I now understand the confliction. I can't say what it is, but I will say, for that reason, I want more books like this. I want more books to be written this way. So if there are any other horror books that you have read that you think are like We Used to Live Here, please let me know, because I'd love to read them. I'm also really excited that he's bringing out a new book. I think it comes out the start of next year, and I'll be getting that straight away because I'm so excited. Next up is Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. In this book, we follow two characters named Sadie and Sam, and they have a love for gaming. I think this is set in the 90s, which I just love. They have a love for gaming and they want to collaborate on a game together. I was told this book had complex characters in it and there was gaming, and that's all I needed to know. What I didn't expect is everything else that came with it. This book was beautifully written. The characters at times were very unlikable, but I was completely immersed in this world. Even now, I can remember scenes so vividly in my mind, which for me is crazy because I have a terrible memory, yet I can still remember the scene so vividly in my mind. And I think that says for how well this book is written. I do want to say that it says on the back, it's not a romance, but it is about love. And that sums this book up perfectly. It is not a romance. It is very much about love. And there are very complex characters in this book. So if that is something you think you would like, then I think this book would be perfect for you. I think it's one of the best, honestly. Lastly is a book I don't actually own, but it is Turn Up the Ocean by Tony someone or other. This is a poetry collection, and again, this is why I always read things out of my comfort zone, because I've yet to find any poetry that I've enjoyed. But at this time, I felt kind of forced into it, in a sense. I went out looking for it, but also it ended up being because I was studying some poetry for my English literature degree, and I wanted to learn how to read poetry and how to understand poetry and just spend some more time in my own time learning about it, because poetry kind of makes me feel a bit stupid. I won't lie. So I went out and I read up some articles and looked into it on, like, say, how to read poetry, how to understand it, what I'm looking for. And eventually I stumbled across Turn Up the Ocean. I was instantly intrigued by it, and I'm so glad that I was, and I ended up picking it up straight away, because I think I ended up enjoying every single poem in this collection. And it's definitely one I want to own now and go through and really understand everything that's written in there. I've also heard that you can read poems over and over again and get different things from it. So I would like to do that. So I would like to own it eventually. But yeah, it was really deep and thought-provoking and easily accessible, which is great for me. I also read the afterword, and there was stuff in there about the author, which I always like to enjoy because I think sometimes it brings the story fully together, or the poetry collection fully together, and makes you understand kind of where they were coming from and what inspired them. So yeah, I really enjoyed that afterward, and it made me feel a lot more for that collection. So yeah, I read a poetry collection that I loved. And this is why I read everything. I keep saying I read everything. That was all the books that have stood out to me in the last year or so. Let me know if there's any that you have read and loved. Also, let me know if there's any horror books like We Used to Live Here, because I need to read them immediately. And if you have read any Ishiguro, which one should I read next? Let me know in the comments below, and I'll see you next time. Bye!